So I met an executive at ABC.
Okay.
And I'd written a script, a pilot, and the guy really liked it. And so Bill, when he was doing this other season of Scrubs, was like, who are the 5 writers, asked this guy, who are the 5 people I need to meet? And he was like, you should meet these people and Prentice.
Right.
And so he was like, great. So he met me and was like, cool, you're hired. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. And I recognized like, oh, the power of this guy telling this guy just put me in a room with him before he even read me.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, I bypassed a step that I didn't have to do. When I was on Scrubs, I met Josh Bicel, who was the showrunner, and Jonathan Groff. And they took a liking to me. And then when Jonathan Groff got to be the showrunner for Happy Endings, he was like, do you want to come do Punch Up? And I was like, sure. So I would go do Punch Up. And when that show got picked up, he was like, you want to come on the show? So no agent, no
just
studio
networking.
approval, just I loved you here, come with me here, right? And I was like, great. And then that is what what are
your titles at this point?
So at that point on Scrubs, I think I was like co-producer, producer,
right.
Happy Endings, I get to be like supervising producer. So I'm moving up.
Can you explain, just for people listening, like the progression of the producer titles in TV and why they're important in your ascension?
So it starts with staff writer, and then basically there are tiers of money and hierarchy. So in the same way that I think like the way an army or like a military service has like, whatever like the lowest is.
Lieutenant, sergeant,
corporal,
whatever,
general, 4-star general, whatever the things are, right? And so that's kind of what they are. So it's like staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, co-producer, producer, supervising producer, co-executive producer, executive producer, right? And they all correlate to some sort of pay. And they all correlate to your credits in terms of how much you're sometimes allowed to do or not allowed to do, and also what awards you can win.
Sure.
And that obviously is a big thing too, and that equates to bonuses and all kinds of stuff or whatever.
And also just explain the title showrunner.
So showrunner, I would say, is the same thing like a director is in movies that they are for television. So the showrunner is usually the creator of the show, typically they don't have to be, but
Not
they usually
always,
are.
Yeah.
They are in charge of hiring the writers. They're in charge of casting the show. They're in charge of how the story should be broken. They're in charge of hiring directors. They're in charge of all the crew. They're in charge of where we're going to film. They're in charge of editing. They're in charge of everything from like the beginning of an idea of an episode of a show to what you see on the screen. They have their hand in all of those things: music, wardrobe, everything. So that's sort of what the showrunner's job is to run the show.
Right.
So I had worked my way up. And so again, but I'm just getting jobs now off relationships. And when I got Brooklyn Nine-Nine, that was the first time also that I had multiple offers at this point. Because before, when you're grinding, you're just like, I'll take whatever show, right?
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
You know, I'm cool, I'm working, right?
Yeah.
Especially being us. You don't always have the luxury to be like, I'm picking and choosing.
Yeah.
But that was the first time I remember getting 4 offers for a show, being like, come. Because also, I had worked on good shows, but also, I'm also the black guy who's worked on these high shows. So like,
extra special,
right?
And at this point, you're co-EP?
At this point, I was moving into co-EP on Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Okay.
And so when I was on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I got hired on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which was a great experience. I won my Golden Globe on Brooklyn. It was like Best New Show. It was like hit all these things. And that staff was really small in the beginning. So a lot of times Dan Gore, who was a showrunner and the co-creator, was like, just go to set. And so I started to be on set a lot more. And so Andy Samberg would be like, send Prentice down, you know what I mean? Or certainly Andre Brower would, and, you know, because he was like, I need some brothers down, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
real talk,
you know,
though.
and so Andre was great. I loved Andre. He was so great. And so, but on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, why Brooklyn Nine-Nine was special was 3 Arts was one of the producers on that show, and David Miner, who's a partner at 3 Arts, who was also Mike Shore's manager, who managed Tina Fey and all these people. And when I was on Brooklyn for the second year, and I kind of knew I need to pivot here. I was like, I could continue to work on Brooklyn. I'll be an EP and I could ride this out, make a lot of money and be totally fine. But I knew I needed to take a step if I was gonna like get to where I needed to get to, right? And also I felt like, man, I've been working with like white people for like 8 years. Yeah. I would like not to be the only black person constantly, right?
That's fair.
And when the showrunning gig for Insecure came up, Issa was also managed at 3 Arts, right? By Dave Becky. and
comedy legend,
who obviously reps Kevin Hart and all these people. Yeah. And so when I talk to David, and this is why it's always like, always do good and be good people no matter where you go. Because that's how I always would just roll. It's like, I'm just going to be a good person because you should just be a good person.
Right.
But then just like do the work too, right? And David Miner had really liked me on Brooklyn. And he saw how much they were using me in terms of like running rooms and being on set. And so when this gig came up to run the show, I asked David, would he put in a word with me, with Dave Becky, about meeting on the show? And what was great about that, obviously, is like, well, David Miner's a partner at 3 Arts. Dave Becky's a partner. So that's just like the same thing of like, hey, will you meet with this guy? He's on our show. I think he'd be great to run the show. Like that already does.
Yeah, it's an easy ask.
Easy ask in the right. And that's when I was like, all the relationships really matter, right? So I got a meeting with Dave and Issa and Jonathan Barry, and that's how I got the gig. It really was all relationships. And then I had Lena Waithe, who knew Issa, because I worked with Lena on Girlfriends. She was a writer's assistant on the show. And I was like, would you put in a word with me with Issa? And she was like, of course.
Do you know who you were up against?
I don't know who I was up against, but what I do know I was up against was, I think at the beginning, HBO wanted to bring in like a older white.
Right. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah. I knew I was up against something like that. So I felt.
But no other brothers.
No.
Okay.
No, because Larry, like Wilmore obviously was going to do it, but then he got his show on Comedy Central. And so I think, it was like, well, they're either going to make a very specific choice here, right? They're either going to pick me or they're going to pick this old white woman. And both would be saying something specific, right? But it's not like I feel like I was up against multiple me's, because also there weren't multiple me's, right? So,
exactly.
So yeah.
And then how is that, obviously the meeting with Issa went well.
Yeah.
What was did you know in that moment, like, A, we fuck with each other, we're going to have a great time.
Yes.
And B, I really believe we're going to do something special.
Yeah, when I read the script, I was like, oh, this is everything I've experienced and everything that I would say. Because one, it was about being the only one in a room, which I was like I know this very well.
Yeah.
It was about working at a nonprofit, which I had done in my hustle days, right? It was living in a very specific part of LA that I grew up in, right? Yep. It was in Windsor Hills. I was living in Inglewood at the time. So I was like, I know this. I was, my wife's an AKA and a lawyer.
My mom's
Molly.
an AKA.
Really?
Yeah.
So my whole family's AKA. So I was like, I'm married to a Molly. I am quirky and weird like an Issa. So I was like, I know this world, right? And so I was just like, I don't know you're going to find someone that can relate to all of these very specific things. And so
you had done the work.
And I had done the work. And I know what I'm doing.
Exactly.
Right? So
that part.
So I was like very comfortable in what I knew I could bring to the table, but also I knew I didn't want to get in the way of this voice. Right. And I knew because I had asked Jonathan Groff, who helped run Happy Endings, but also helped run Blackish with Kenya Barris.
Oh, wow.
So he was Kenya's sort of intro to like run Blackish. And so the one thing Jonathan told me was like, you're always there to support what they're trying to say, right? And you never want to walk away with them feeling like that you got in the way of their thing, right? You're in service of the thing. And that's how I always viewed it. I always kind of viewed it like, I'm the best stepfather the show knows, right? I didn't birth it, but I'm the only father it knows in this capacity and raising it, right? So but Issa's still the mom. And so that was always, but the second we met, we just like made sure to laugh. I think we met 20 minutes and then we were like, yeah, I guess we should do this. But that's almost how we made every decision.
Was it like that though in the room?
Like, what do you mean?
When you first met her, it was like...
We met, she had a book signing for her book at SO1 Books, which sadly is not in Lumber Park anymore. And we just met and we just started making sure to laugh, like almost within... It's like, I don't know, like how do people have chemistry when you like fall in love with somebody? You're just like, oh, we just hit it off.
Work chemistry.
We just, and I almost say we talked for 20 minutes and then we were like, yeah, let's do it. You know what I mean? Like that, it wasn't like any more thoughts and we just kept talking for like another 40 minutes and then that was it.